All right, so I think we can pretty much start, and I'll just, I'm sure more people will join as we get going, but yeah, cool. All right, so yeah, as I guess you guys know, well, this webinar is about fundraising, but we've been doing kind of a series of Goodpush webinars since mid-March, so since the COVID stuff kind of was hitting a lot of countries. And we've done them on a range of topics that have just kind of come up organically. So we just started talking about like, what are the challenges? What are the responses? We talked about like different curriculum people have been adapting. And then one of the other topics that came up a lot of times was fundraising and like how people are kind of dealing with things getting disrupted. Maybe the way that they usually had money coming in is not possible right now. And more generally, fundraising is a topic that I think a lot of organizations are always looking for kind of tips on. And at Skateistan, we have this, what we call the Goodpush Alliance, and it's a network for social skate projects. And something that we do is we provide support on different topics, and fundraising is always like one of the most popular topics. So sometimes we do calls with people and stuff about it. So we thought like, hey, let's do a webinar, and then we can all talk together and share ideas. And I know that yeah, all of your projects have different models and different ways that you do fundraising. So, you know, there's not one size fits all, but we thought maybe what would be helpful is today, if we hear from, I'm going to go into my next slide, if we hear from Felix, who is the development director at Skateistan. So that means he's like the head of the fundraising worldwide for Skateistan. And yeah, and he can just kind of give you a sort of behind the scenes look on how we're doing things at Skateistan. Maybe it gets you some ideas. And also I really encourage people throughout this webinar to take advantage of the chat box, and you can ask questions in there. Even like as Felix is speaking, just pop in your questions. You can also put in your ideas and your tips and connect with each other, because it's a really cool chance to, yeah, basically connect with people that are doing similar stuff all around the world. So yeah, I'll just quickly intro Felix before he goes into it. But yeah, he first joined Skateistan. He'll tell you a little bit more, but he first joined Skateistan as a volunteer at our Berlin office in 2014, and basically worked his way up the organization and the fundraising team to become development director at the start of last year. So he knows a lot about all the different kinds of ways of getting support for your project. And I think, yeah, it'll be pretty interesting. He'll do like a kind of a little presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A for at least the second half or maybe more of the call today. So yeah, as I said, just pop any questions you have along the way in here, and then I can kind of like field them later when we get into the Q&A time. So yeah, I'm going to stop presenting and hand over to Felix.
You know what, actually, Rhiannon, do you want to keep presenting? Have you got the
yeah, sure,
the whole thing there?
Okay, cool. I'll do it.
I'll be messing around less with
All right, I will do it.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. As Rhiannon said, my name's Felix. I've been working with Skateistan since about 2014, so 6 years now. Been skating since I was about 12, 10, 11, 12, something like that. I can never quite remember. And yeah, most of my experience fundraising has been kind of built up through these different roles I've had with Skateistan. So prior to working at Skateistan, I worked for a number of different homelessness organisations in London. But that was in a much more sort of frontline social work role. So I was a drug and alcohol support worker, and so didn't actually have a great deal of experience doing fundraising until I started working at Skateistan. And I started as a volunteer assistant to the then fundraising manager. Yeah, and over the course of 4 or 5 years, I've had a number of different roles within both the sort of communications and fundraising, and yeah, so through that built a fairly broad skill set of how we get people to support our organisation. Yeah, I mean, in my current role, along with an amazingly talented, awesome team, it's my job to oversee and look after all of Skateistan's communications and fundraising. and make sure we raise enough budget each year to keep all the teachers paid and the kids skating. Yeah, a couple of disclaimers. My accent can be a little bit tricky sometimes, so like just let me know if you need me to repeat anything, or if I'm rambling on, just let me know. Or if I start using terms that are a bit too fundraisy, sometimes that can happen, where you just sort of assume everyone kind of is on the same page there. So I hope there's going to be some like helpful kind of hints and tips, which will help you guys sort of save energy and time when raising money for your organisations. But I do want to say there isn't like a magic trick that will just like make money appear for your organisations. It's basically like a lot of hard work and a very sort of like positive sort of can-do attitude. Yeah, and a tiny sprinkling of luck. Like there is definitely a little bit of luck involved in fundraising, but I mean, it's important to remember you make your own luck, right? You jump on all the right opportunities at the right time. You recognise those right place, right time moments. Yeah, and we got a fairly short amount of time, so I'm not going to be able to cover absolutely everything, and I'll answer all questions as best I can. But I also still have a lot to learn about raising money for social skate projects, and I'll focus on all the stuff that's been quite successful for Skateistan and where I've built experience. But actually, there's a lot of income streams that Skateistan has had fairly sort of minimal success with, that a lot of other projects do really well. So I'm hoping that towards the end of the call we can get a bit more of a discussion going and kind of hear from you guys about what's worked for you as well. Just because Skateistan does things in one way doesn't mean it's the right or the only way to do it. Yeah, should we go into what we'll cover? Awesome. So I'll try and run through all this stuff as quick as possible. There is a bit of rambling to be done. We'll start by sort of defining some different areas of income, so some sort of basics on fundraising. We'll cover some fundraising essentials like creating fundraising plans and reaching out to new donors. We'll talk about fundraising and COVID-19's impact on raising money, and kind of the importance of using this time that we've got at the moment as best we can. And then we'll run through some tips and tricks that will hopefully save you guys a bit of time and energy. Cool. So I mean, some basics on fundraising. Generally, NGOs need funds to operate. Our impact can be way bigger and way more sustainable if there's more resources to work with. And in terms of resources and money, this could be for staff, for learning supplies, for boards, for building materials for a skate park, anything. But a lot of organisations have like really great volunteer programs, and as skateboarders, we're pretty resourceful at making volunteerships work really well. But even a project running entirely voluntarily will incur some cost at some stage. So finding money is never going to be a bad thing. Basically, there's two kind of main areas of funding, and you can see them visualized with this amazing graphic design I've done here. So the one area is like grants and what we call institutional funding. So this is often money that's given to your cause that is tied very specifically to a particular location or an activity that you're going to do, and that money can very rarely be spent elsewhere. So an example for Skateistan is we'll raise money specifically for our back to school program for children that aren't in school in Kabul. And quite often the types of donors that will give you these kind of grants will be kind of governments, aid agencies and foundations. On the other side, we have what we call unrestricted funding, and this is money that's usually given to support the organisation as a whole. And can often be spent wherever the organisation needs it to be spent. So at the end of the year, you may have like some gaps in your budget, and that may be for whatever, building materials for a skate park or a skate teacher's salary. And this is the kind of money that you can put towards those kind of costs. So this is and typically this is like individuals and corporates. And I've also put some other types of income here that, and I've got them in italics because Skateistan actually doesn't really do these, but I know there's possibly some people on the call who do this stuff. So paying participants that subsidise programs for participants that can't pay, and things like volunteer fees, people raising a certain amount of money to be like a skate teacher at your project, or selling merchandise. And another stream that I've not actually listed here, but is in-kind sponsorship. So the donation of things like equipment, land, even, and this can significantly reduce your overall budget and mean that you have to raise less money. Cool. So I wanted to kind of start here by touching on some of the super kind of key and important areas of funding. So like diversifying your funding, making fundraising plans, and reaching out to new donors. So top one, prioritize fundraising. This is really the first step. You've got to prioritize raising money for what you do. There's always going to be other priorities that crop up. There'll always be programmatic or operational things that you have to deal with. But the impact that you'll have on people's lives or on the community through a social skate project will be way, way bigger if your organization is more stable and more sustainable. So at some point, raising money just can't be a side project. It really has to be quite core and quite high priority to what you do. Focusing on all income streams, so having an action plan for increasing and maintaining each source of funding. So if you've only got one or two sources of funding, then it might be time to start thinking about, right, how do we get a different type of donor on board, or a different type of money coming in, and try and create a plan for how that works. Setting goals. So kind of what budget do you want to be securing in the next 5 years, and why? And then once you have those goals set and your reasoning behind that, then you can start to work backwards and say, like, what are the small steps I need to take, or the organization needs to take to get there? And we can go into a bit more detail on that later, perhaps. Reaching out to different new supporters. I think here you've really got to be active in trying to find donors. It's very rare that people will come to you. You've got to identify the people that you want to work with and start to talk with them about whether partnership or collaboration might be possible. Mentors is really, really great. If you can find a mentor with relevant experience raising money for an organization that's vaguely similar to yours, and in the case of social skateboarding projects, like usually any kind of community project or sports project can be pretty relevant. We'll definitely have some transferable skills. And those kind of people with the right experience can kind of advise on your pitches to people, or read over applications, and sometimes even introduce you to new funders. And building rapport. So as many kind of in-person meetings as you can do will go a long way. Even phone calls, just establishing really, really positive relationships with the people that are giving you equipment or money. It just means you're far more likely to find new donors and keep them on board if you have like a good sort of personal relationship with them. Fundraising and COVID-19. It's a really difficult time for a lot of NGOs and a lot of small businesses and everyone, frankly. And again, here I don't have a magic trick that can kind of solve these problems, but there's a few things you can do that kind of ease it. And again, I would say diversity for diversifying the type of money that you're getting in. So if you're aiming for diversified funds, it's always going to be the safest bet, having more than one leg to stand on. If you have one funding stream that kind of dries up a little bit, then you've got other ones to fall back on. So my boss and I were in a webinar, I don't know, it was maybe last week, with a lot of different sports for development organizations, and a lot of which had lost quite significant amounts of funding because they relied very, very heavily on events funding, and lots of NGOs do this. Certainly, lots of social skate projects. But if you make a plan that actually raising money at an event becomes only, I don't know, a fifth of the money that you're getting in, or only the one type of income stream, then you're less likely to be super affected by losing one. Yeah, I think now's the time to focus on some income streams that are a bit less affected by kind of COVID-19 economics. Now, obviously the economic implications of a pandemic like this will kind of eventually sort of affect absolutely everything and everyone. But I mean, I guess here I'm referring to donors that might have had less dramatic cuts to their income immediately. So basically right now is not the best time for kind of raising money from companies and corporates, and certainly not small businesses. But on the other hand, quite a lot of individuals might have not had their budgets kind of dramatically cut, and the same with some foundations as well. I mean, it depends, but in general, I would say it's not the best time for corporates. Better to focus on like foundations and people instead. Yeah, maintaining relationships with your donors in this time is really, really important. You're just far less likely to have your funding cut or your funding pulled if you have a really, really great kind of honest, sort of strong working relationship with your donors. What else? Doing some income projections. Yeah, so I think this is about contingency planning. And I think it's really important to make some kind of predictions as to how COVID might affect your income, even if it's like really worst case scenario stuff. If you're following a kind of step-by-step plan, and you know what you're going to do at each step of the way, you lose a little bit of money, then you kind of start to take a bit more control back of the situation, and things can feel a little bit less overwhelming. Updating your supporters is really, really important in this time. So what adaptations have you done to the way you run your project? How have you adjusted to this new reality? And telling donors this, they would, if they've given you money, they'll be interested in this. And also don't be afraid to ask for support for this, because essentially this is kind of opportunity to say, look, we've switched what we do. Actually, we've kind of switched from running regular skate classes, and at the moment we're providing, say for instance, masks, or masks and gloves and hand sanitizer and that kind of thing. But we need your support to keep doing this. And if you can support us with a donation today, then we'll be able to keep engaging our participants throughout this whole difficult time. So there are. I mean, it can also definitely be the time to ask people for support too. And I mentioned this at the beginning slightly, that there will always be something that gets in the way of long-term administrative stuff like fundraising. And I think now, when everyone has to kind of slow down a little bit, now is the time to kind of to think about setting up a fundraising plan and using this bit of time more kind of wisely. It's a great time to get on top of kind of governance stuff, like registering yourself as an NGO with government departments and that kind of thing. This can be quite long-winded and a bit overwhelming, but this will open up so many more opportunities for raising money, especially with kind of institutions and governments and that kind of thing. And also a good time to get all your sort of policies in place, which will also help with fundraising. So do you have a child protection policy? Do you have systems to kind of monitor your impact? Are you recording what participants you're working with and their backgrounds? Do you survey whether they're kind of enjoying it, and the impact that you're having? And then also think about like what else can we do? What are new sort of crowdfunding campaign ideas and that sort of stuff? Cool. Tricks and tips. Cool. So yeah, so one of the things that has really made a huge difference for us at Skateistan is kind of creating some systems that really help to save you time. So we created things like a fundraising pack. We noticed we had so many people emailing that had very similar questions about like, oh, I'm going to host like an event in my skate park and raise some money for you guys. Like, how do I do that? And actually we managed to kind of streamline that process into like, here's a fundraising pack that explains kind of everything. And I can't recommend that enough. And you can do this in, I think, just streamlining in any way you can. Again, this goes for more institutional funding as well. That like, if you're writing a lot of applications to say different governments or foundations or larger aid agencies, then if you keep all of those applications and start to form like a kind of like a master document that you can just pull stuff from, that can save a lot of time and energy as well. Yeah, and on a related note, actually, it's really good to have sort of pre-prepared pictures about why your work achieves social impact, and the themes that you can focus on there may or may not be similar to Skateistan, but obviously we're kind of always focusing on sort of how we create kind of gender equality and gender equity in society, and how we empower women, and how we improve children's mental and physical well-being, and I think there's some very similar outcomes that happen with a lot of your projects. So kind of pre-preparing some of those arguments for that is super important. And I guess you can kind of create some documents that help when you're kind of reaching out to people. So like some template emails and like a one-page PDF that explains everything that you do and why, and the impact that you have as a result. Yeah, with any funder, regardless of the income stream, if it's unrestricted, kind of individuals giving you money or foundations or governments, as much of a relationship as you can build with them, it will go a really surprisingly long way. People like to, they want to know the people they're investing in, and they want to trust those people, and it's very difficult to do that just through kind of email contact and kind of sort of long applications. Sometimes you need to get on the phone with people and sort of let people know who you are. There's some, in terms of doing research, there's some newsletter services that you can use that collate different opportunities for grants for NGOs. And sometimes you have to pay for these. We use one called Funds for NGOs, and I think it does cost money, but it's not huge amounts. If you don't have any budget for that kind of thing, another thing you can do is look at research organizations that are of a similar kind of size to you, or do a similar kind of have a vaguely similar mission, and look at who funds them. Look in their annual reports at who funds them, and start to work out whether those people could potentially support you. And I guess some standard sort of internet research about on kind of and base it on your scope of work, whether that's sort of refugee integration or providing positive recreational activities for children. Sometimes those, if you find a funder that issues money for that kind of work, then you can get really lucky with some of those shots in the dark, as long as your missions are very aligned. But it's always helpful to know someone and have some contact with someone at an organisation like that first before you submit an application. Right, yeah, keep donors on board. Like this may sound really obvious, but there's some pretty simple moves you can do to kind of keep people involved. So always remember that it's like 100% easier to keep a donor on board that already gives you money than to pluck one out of thin air and find a new person. So if you've run, say like a campaign on social media, asking your audience to donate, make sure you stay in contact with all of those people, and that you have a system for contacting all of those people. and then along the way, by the time you need to ask for money again, you go to those people first. Because they're way more likely to give you money than some random person. It's quite difficult actually to find completely new donors out of nowhere. So if you're setting up something like a kind of crowdfunding campaign page, or like integrating like we just have like a payment processor directly on our website, so like something like PayPal or Stripe, always make sure that you're choosing one that will allow you to kind of have some contact and email people afterwards. Obviously there's kind of data protection stuff around that, so you've got to choose the right platform essentially. But it's really essential that you can contact people after they've given money. Yeah, and then actually the same deal. Like you need to kind of if you're focused on keeping donors on board, then you should start to know actually where most of your donations are coming from. So an example in our case is that at Skateistan we run a couple of fundraising campaigns a year, but actually like the total amount of money, we've kind of planned out nearly all of where that is coming from. We kind of, I would say it's probably only about 20%, maybe 30% of those donations come in like completely randomly. Other than that, it's more, it's that we know that like this person that has supported us before, they usually give around this time of year, so we can probably expect a donation from them. This company has supported before and they responded quite well to our last campaign, so let's hope the money comes in from there. We've kind of actually planned all of that out in advance. It's quite rare, and I think this is the same for a lot of NGOs, whether they involve skateboarding or not. It's quite rare that people will just like put a load of content together, run it on social media, and money will just come flooding in. It's you kind of got to know who you're asking first. The bit about storytelling on social media gives a much better it sets the scene a lot better to ask for a campaign, to ask for a donation, and you can usually pitch those asks at a similar time to people usually giving money anyways. Yeah, making it easy for people to support you. So I think when you've got things like a donation page on a website or a crowdfunding page, make sure that it's as simple and as easy as possible to kind of for someone to complete a transaction on there. So like shop around a little bit and choose one that you think is easy. I recommend, I don't know if anyone from Seven Hills is on the call, but I know that Seven Hills has a really easy to use page. I'm not sure what giving platform they use, but that's worth checking out. And then also just make sure that whatever's on those pages there where you're asking people to give them money doesn't distract the person that's trying to support you in any way. So kind of don't have too much text on there, and try and get rid of anything that doesn't scream to the person on the website. Just complete the donation. Yeah, and I guess in terms of making it easy for people to support, in-kind donations is quite important here as well, because say for instance, obviously we're kind of in a sector that, like social skateboarding, it's really important that actually that there's not huge amounts of money floating around in the skateboard industry, especially in sort of like independently owned skate brands. So sometimes in-kind donations might be a way better ask than asking a small company for money, and through that you might be able to reduce a huge amount of your budget anyways, because that was otherwise equipment that you might have had to pay for. Yeah, making your asks emotive, urgent, and tangible. Sorry, I could again. That's some of that sort of fundraising lingo there. But cheers, Rhiannon. Yeah, so when you're asking people for money, you've got to appeal to people's emotions. So yeah, if people make donations based on kind of based on their feelings and then their heart, right? Less like a logical equation most of the time. So if you're always focusing on how important your project is to the people that take part, how important it is to their lives, then that is already way more kind of emotive and persuasive than simply saying this is what we do. So it's not just about like, okay, we run a weekly skate class for this many children. It's more, what does it mean? What does taking part in a skate class mean to one of those participants' lives? And that instantly, if you frame it around that instantly makes your ask way more emotive. And it's that kind of emotive storytelling through social media that will make kind of your fundraising campaigns and that kind of thing much more successful. And actually, as skateboarders, we're kind of quite naturally pretty good at doing things like social media and storytelling. It's a big part of skating anyway. So again, it's about using that to your advantage. Asking people, making your ask urgent. If your pitch is about just give us some money whenever you get the chance to, you'll go on the to-do list with absolutely everything else that your potential supporter has to do that weekend. So it's like you've got to stress in all of your ask for money that it has to be today and you need support right now. And then the other thing is making your ask tangible. So making the people that are going to give you money understand what that amount of money means for your organization. So the classic one in sort of aid agencies, so organizations like Oxfam would do this thing where they would say for $20 you can buy a family a goat, and obviously you're not literally buying a goat. You're probably supporting like a sustainable farming program or something along those lines. But what they've done is to show you what it means to the beneficiaries of that charity's lives, and how important that small amount of money can be. So when you're asking for donations, don't just say we need $10. It's like we need $10, and this is what this can do for us, for our organisation, and for the people we work with. Focusing on your mission. I mean, sometimes, and this happens more in kind of institutional funding and grants opportunities, that sometimes a certain grant might require that your mission kind of changes slightly. I would always advise against that, and kind of sticking to what you do and sticking to your core mission. Essentially, you are the expert in your social skateboarding project, and you should find people that can support that, and people should be invested in that and want to support that. So it's about understanding your role in the relationship and the donor's role, and it's kind of their job to support you in what you do rather than tell you what to do necessarily. Speaking the donor's language is really, really important. So and this goes for individuals and for governments, foundations. We can't assume that people 100% understand the impact of skateboarding, and that's why you've got to focus on social outcomes that happen as a result of skateboarding. So things like social cohesion and gender equality and just the provision of like a safe space for kids. These are the things you've got to focus on, and you've got to get your arguments sorted on that, and have your explanation ready to go. Because if you don't, then the answer will always be, unless the person happens to be a skateboarder, which you have to get quite lucky with in terms of like government fundraising, although it can happen. The answer will always be, then what's the point? Why skateboarding it doesn't seem that important to me. So you've got to focus on like what skateboarding means and what skateboarding brings to your participants. And I think with that, it's also about, you've got to provide some evidence as well. So kind of recording. Do you know how many people you're working with? Do you know what their backgrounds are? Can you kind of provide that in sort of data and facts and figures? And that kind of provides evidence of like the impact of your work, but also evidence that your project is important and that community needs the project. Yeah, and lastly, just combining opportunities. So never miss a moment to fundraise. If someone's got a if someone's going to kind of make a film about what you do, or you've got someone reposting something from your organization, then always make sure you're running some really great kind of storytelling at that moment on your platforms that says, please support us today. Yeah, there we go. As I said, I'm rambling quite a lot there. We still got a bit of time, but I hope some of that ramble was useful.
Cool, awesome. Thanks, Felix. Really good overview with lots of tips there. So I already asked people to start putting questions in the chat box. So yeah, anyone else who hasn't put a question there, feel free to put them, and we'll just kind of go through and ask some of them. So one that was asked, which I think kind of relates to another one. So the first one here was from Bangladesh Street Kids Aid, where they ask, would Felix be willing to share which companies are most likely to support social skate projects? And then I think maybe a related question, Felix, that I'll just kind of check in there, was that Francisco from Chile asked, how's the best way to get in contact with potential donors? So they don't have any kind of donors or sponsors, and it's been hard to get in touch with companies. So who's the person they need to look for to show them the project, and how do they reach them? So maybe what kinds of companies, or what companies, and how do you get in touch with them?
Sure. I guess quite often the companies that will support you, if they've got a dedicated department for sponsoring organizations, that will be kind of listed somewhere on their website. But it's quite rare that organizations do that, or that companies do that secretly. Companies usually want to make quite a big deal of that, and that would be part of their kind of marketing quite often. So from that, you should kind of be able to see which companies look like they would be good supporters for organizations. Again, I think you've got to think about companies that have very obvious sort of values in their marketing that align well with what you do. So for instance, with Skateistan, we're often talk to companies that for instance talk a lot about women's empowerment in some of their marketing, or skateboarding or extreme sports, this kind of thing. And sometimes people will come to you on this. I think it's really important to reach out to those companies and start with we'd love to talk about some kind of collaboration or some kind of partnership. We run this NGO. Who's the best person to speak to? And try and ask. Some organizations will have like systems already set up to donate to organizations. So you'll see it on a website that says something like corporate social responsibility. And through there, they'll usually have sort of more like application forms and kind of act a lot more like an institutional kind of grants donor. But otherwise, yeah, it's about kind of being active and looking at donors that kind of, yeah, that have that a kind of social element to their marketing.
Yeah, and I think there's a good feedback here from South Coast Dale, who also said that he found a good way to get sponsors was to just offer small companies a chance to go up as a sponsor, maybe like in the on banners or whatever, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And then they can just send a couple of stickers and it snowballed from there. So I think there's like this geographic element with support from companies. So if you look at companies that are working really in the community that you work in, that's also a real opportunity. And then you can really go up to any kind of a company. You could go up to even just like a supermarket, or like independent businesses that are there, or you can also look for sponsored services. Like in Cambodia and Afghanistan, I think we've had internet sponsored at different times and stuff like that. So and that was local companies wanting to like get behind something. So Cool. So I'm just going back up to the questions here. So Maya asked, what software do people use for donor tracking? So maybe Felix, you can answer. And if anyone uses something else, you can also put it in the chat, like other options for that.
Sure. Yeah, we have a kind of data kind of management system called Salesforce, and that's how we track donors. But prior to that, and we've been using that since about 2017 or so, and that makes things that makes things way better to handle if you've got a kind of quite a lot of small donations coming in. Otherwise, you can quite simply like just with Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets and stuff like that, you can kind of keep track of people fairly. It depends on the amount of money you're raising and the amount of individual donors that you have. But I would say if you're kind of starting out, then actually you can do a pretty good job with just with just Excel spreadsheets and stuff.
Yeah, I think we have on the Goodpush site, we have a toolkit, and there's one on fundraising. And I think there's at the bottom of the toolkit, I'll get the link in a sec. I think there might be like a link to like a template for like a kind of donor tracking spreadsheet. I'm not sure. If there isn't though, I can put one up there. But
yeah, we definitely have some that we can share.
Yeah, I'll send the link. I'll put the link there in a sec. Cool. And then we have a question from Simon from Skate Nottingham. Do Goodpush, Skateistan have any resources to assist organizations like ours to complete application forms for funding? Each funder will have different priorities, but there might be similarities for buzzwords like improving, reducing, greater, which communicate the impact of skateboarding. So like some text on like why skateboarding kind of thing.
Do we have some of that in the Goodpush resources already?
There's Talia shared the link for we have a monitoring, evaluation, and learning section, which has some information about like how to frame things. I don't know if we have exactly that, but if people are interested, we want to kind of work on basically like I don't know if people are familiar with it, but like a logic model or like this kind of thing that donors often ask for, where you kind of show the journey of your participant to some bigger impact. We want to work on that, putting together something kind of generic and like big picture for the Goodpush community this year. So if anyone is interested in being a part of putting that together, then let me know, because that's something we want to kind of make and then distribute so people have like the basic thing they can use and then adapt. So
yeah, I would say just like as I kind of mentioned, you're right, there are some of these kind of sort of buzzword elements in there that and again, I think if you're always like every organization is going to be different, and every organization's outcomes are going to be slightly different. So it is good to sort of to work on your own argument, because that's also really important in fundraising. You've kind of got to show why you are the important organization that funder should be supporting. I would always just say with that you're focusing on why does that community need your project, and also what is the ultimate impact of that, and that should make your funding application way more strong. Again, it's people that don't necessarily understand the ins and outs of skateboarding or even sports programs are going to be less instantly won over by like this is what we're doing. It's more about why and why there is a need in that community, and so with that sense, it's kind of like they are going to be different every time. But you're right, yeah. There's definitely some buzzword things, kind of generally social cohesion and particularly sort of like integration and community building are all kind of things that are fairly similar across the board.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. We have a question here from Surf Ghana asking, can you give us an example of successful fundraising campaigns? So maybe some at Skateistan or some other ones you've seen, Felix?
Yeah, some successful. Well, I mean, yeah, so our last, yeah. So I mean, we've had some really awesome ones. that have been really successful. I think the thing that helps us quite a lot is when we kind of built some relationships with some people with quite big followings that were willing to kind of support our cause by like reposting our images and stuff. And so I think that's kind of quite important to work out, right? How are you gonna get stuff out there? Also, when we released a film and it got quite popular and it was in kind of newspapers and stuff, that's like really key to a social media or a fundraising campaign. It is getting it out to a really broad audience, and as broad an audience as the whole thing can reach, then it's far more likely that you'll get kind of a lot more random donations coming in. So finding a kind of hook for the media is always really important, because otherwise it's usually just like, okay, this is another organization that's raising money. So finding a kind of hook within that for like, and usually like big newspapers and stuff like that, in an area where people have disposable income. And so like, yeah, focusing on kind of North American and sort of West European audiences can be really key for that as well. Just don't think of another, off the top of my head. I'm struggling off the top of my head to think of another organisation. We see amazing campaigns all the time. I'll come back to that one. Let me think on that one.
Yeah, I think a couple organizations that have done some crowdfunding campaigns that I think have gone pretty well are, I think, Concrete Jungle Foundation. I don't know if they still have theirs up, and then also Make Life Skate Life have done some.
Make Life Skate Life did a really awesome one with because I seem to remember myself and Talia, our programs director at Skateistan, we both donated, and there was like Talia got her name in the skate park somewhere or something like that. So sometimes those incentives kind of work quite well. Yeah,
totally. Let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, I have some questions. If anyone else has any, put them in the chat. I'm sorry if I hope I asked all the ones that were there. So what would you say, so a lot of people have limited time to put towards their skate projects. A lot of people are volunteering. If people have limited time, what do you think is like the essentials to do with fundraising? Like, what should they prioritize? Is it like the systems? Is it, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
like social media. Like, what should they do?
I think it's about the system. I think it's about people being able to donate to you in the first place. Like that's what you've got to set up. If you don't have that, then it's going to be very difficult for you to raise money if there's not a way for people to give you money in the first place. So I think that's super important, and that will save a lot of time, and that can kind of run itself a little bit. The other thing is this recording who is giving you money, and getting back in touch with them. Like I said, I think that should be sort of number one takeaway, is that like when you get a donor on board, the trick is not to lose them and then to keep getting more people on board. It's not to like that you run a kind of campaign, say like a crowdfunding campaign, and a certain amount of people give you money, and then the next time it's a whole different set of people giving you money. So you need to build that base up, and it can be slowly, and you can kind of like we said, there's simple ways to track this, but yeah, keeping in touch with people. Other essentials when you don't have so much time. Yeah, I mean, when you don't have so much time, I guess it's about streamlining everything to like, right, what is there that I can do that can help to save time, and that's where that kind of those systems things come in.
Another question I have, because I think this comes up a lot with projects I've talked to, is how essential do you think it is for social skate projects to be officially registered as a charity?
Oh, that man, essential. I mean, there's a few different reasons. One is it's really, really difficult to get support from any kind of government agency or any kind of much larger sort of official granting organization. It's very, very difficult for them to support an organization that is not a registered charity or a registered kind of NGO or non-profit. So in that sense, it's kind of, yeah, almost essential. It can also be tricky to raise money, to be raising money on behalf of and pitching yourself as a charity if you're not a charity. This kind of stuff is really, it can be a little bit, it can be tricky and a tad overwhelming dealing with those kind of like administrative stuff. But it depends where you are, and that's kind of where you can use like mentors to help you. So if you know there's a smaller or there's an organization of a similar size working in your area, ask them what were the steps they took to register themselves as an NGO. But yeah, I think it's essential for all types of fundraising too, with individuals and like individual people and especially companies giving you money. Like usually if a company gives you money, they're gonna need or at least it's a good bonus for companies to be able to kind of take that off their taxes at the end of the year. So you can only issue a tax deductible kind of receipt or notification that they've sponsored you if you're a registered charity. So I would say that's really, really, yeah, it's kind of first thing on the list, really.
Cool.
It's a legitimacy boost as well. So you can that comes straight into your pitch when you're talking to someone straight away. Mm-hmm. So what is it? You just running kind of like sessions down the skate park. So no, we're a registered non-profit organisation. Mm-hmm. And straight away there's a bit more legitimacy to the whole thing. So it can be really, really, really helpful for sure.
Cool. And then we have a very practical question from Surf Ghana. Do you know grants for building skate parks that are going, because they're struggling most of the time, they can support everything except construction?
Yeah, so the skate room, awesome sponsor of Skateistan, and they run and they do have some grants. Although I'm not sure they have any more for the rest of this. Is Clara on the call? Actually, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I don't think they do this year, but I think they're going to do more calls for.
I would always say it depends. It depends where you are. So I think what we usually find is that say if you're operating in Ghana, then the embassies of they just do one per year now. Okay. Mm-hmm. So embassies of different countries in Ghana would be a good place to start, I would imagine. That's what we usually find. That say for instance, like the British embassy in Ghana, I have no idea exactly what their priorities are, but it does crop up quite often that you'll have funds from a kind of foreign embassy in
towards youth and culture or something.
Exactly, youth and culture, that kind of thing, and they will often not be able to fund staffing costs. So essentially, the only thing they can fund is either like is kind of building materials and or land or vehicles or that kind of stuff. So that happens quite often with different kind of government types of money.
Cool. And we're running close out of time, but there was one more question. So we have lots of good comments in there too of people sharing their experience. Thanks for that. Awesome. So we had from Tony Fraliciardi, I can't say that, sorry. Have you all ever used community asset mapping models? So looking for resources in the community for in-kind and practical resources, such as a company willing to donate concrete for building, labor, food for volunteers.
Have we ever used that? I mean, we've done a lot of stuff in partnership with different organisations, but not in such a structured way like that. Although that sounds like an amazing idea. I think that, it Sounds awesome. Let us know when if there's someone we can speak to about it.
Yeah, I think maybe Bangladesh Street Kids Aid, I think maybe got some, they're looking to build a skate park too, and we're looking at some like concrete sponsorships and stuff like that. So that's a smart thing to look into to cut down on costs. Cool. So I think that's all the questions that we had today, and we're pretty much near the end. So thank you so much, Felix, for sharing your knowledge and, I don't know, the things you've learned over the years, and I think it's yeah, really helpful.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, and if yeah, as you can always kind of email the Goodpush email with anything that you kind of want one of us to look over.
Yeah, I just put it in there. Yeah, and for anyone here, I'm not sure like what people's interest levels are, but at the end of each of these calls, we just kind of ask people if there's any sort of topic that they'd be interested in a future webinar on from Goodpush. It could be related to what we talked about today, or related to more generally to COVID issues, or just to skate programs, whatever. So if anyone has any topics that you would like to like kind of bring to this forum and like discuss with other people that are working in social skating. So we've done different formats too, where we just have like 1 or 2 people speak for 5 minutes just to kick it off, and then it's much more like whoever wants can kind of chip in on a topic. So if anyone has anything, put it in the chat box, or you can get in touch with me afterwards, and we'll probably set up another webinar in July sometime. So yeah, if there's anything interesting, then let me know. And yeah, otherwise, I've already put the link in for our toolkit, so I'll send that out in the follow-up email. And you might find some more useful resources there that kind of relate to everything that we talked about here. So I hope it was useful, and thanks for attending, and also for sharing all of your tips in the chat box. Cool. All right. And that's that.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Felix.
No worries.
Cool. Bye, everybody. See you at the next one, hopefully.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Felix. That was right on time.